lens for that one.
I got it.
Link, I don't remember you without a scab on your nose.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
I don't know that I ever saw.
Luke particularly, welcome. We're glad the parole officers have allowed so many of you to come. I do not know, I feel very inadequate to even say to Luke what I want to say to him, much less to say what other people would want to say to him, to represent all of those who are not here, so many young men and women whose lives he has touched. I'm going to try to play the old man here a little bit. I've known Luke for 42 years, all the way back to where I remember 7th graders being dragged from right field by their heels, where they fainted in a parade, and waking up to see Luke Worsham looking at them saying, "Son, it's going to be all right." You've said that to a lot of us in a lot of different places, actually, and we're not sure it ever has been all right, but it was good to hear it. There are many of us tonight, with us tonight in spirit. There are a lot of people around us, Luke. I called Luke, talked to him a little about, the fact that I'd like to represent my father. I'd like to represent all of those in those early days, some of whom are here, Humpy, Jim Worthington, Doc Bach, Coach Reich, Pennington, Berriman, Rankin, Sib Evans, Hitt. Hitt isn't ever going to die, he's still here. Ashley, Bradley, Jimmy Duke, Bruce High, and Tyree, and Doreen, who knew more about Baylor than my father ever knew. Having been a little in the educational business, the more I look back on those faculty members, it was an incredible, magical faculty. I don't know where my father ever found those people. They were remarkable people. And they are with us. I was 16 years old and working in the summer camp. There are a lot of us here who remember the summer camp. Mr. Haywood used to go to Florida and tell everybody that if you came to Baylor camp, we'd take you to the Smokies. And then Luke and Sib Evans and all of us would put 400 kids in 5 Greyhound buses and take them into the Smokies for a wilderness experience. And Luke, I'm sure you remember the day that you opened the door of the Greyhound bus and a hornet's nest fell into the bus. Also, we were up on the side of the hill one time, and Luke had told a child not to get out of his sleeping bag, and Luke has a way of explaining things so people remember it. And we had one of those rains that comes only in the Smokies, and it washed down, and we were wandering around, and this kid the water was coming off the hill, and it had filled his sleeping bag, and he was floating inside his sleeping bag. And Luke said, "Son, I didn't mean you had to stay in it all the time. You can get out." Billy Kiefer is here. Billy Kiefer, one time when we had 400 people up there, we had a big campfire, and we had all these 400 people around the campfire, and Billy Kiefer put a gallon can of beans in the campfire to heat, and it exploded. And about 100 people had little red dots all over their face. In 1971, I came to Baylor, and suddenly this man who I was frightened of all my life, I was his boss. And that was a very scary experience. He was a great teacher, is a great teacher, a great football coach, really an amazing wrestling coach. And we could go on and on. I remember we had the first minority child, a black child named Monty Brule. And Monty was not a great athlete. He went on to distinguish himself at Harvard and other places. And Monty was sitting on the bench as a manager, and they got into a meet, and they didn't have the weight classification that was there, and so Luke just turned to Monty and grabbed him by the hair and said, "Son, you go wrestle." And Monty said, I'm the manager." He said, "Son, go wrestle." And I thought my minority program had just disappeared. Luke has this way, as you know, of grabbing children by the hair and by the nose and by the ear and by the head. And as I became, in this litigious world, I would just worry, what has he done now? Who has he grabbed now? But all of us seem to survive that. I've been trying ever since I knew I was asked to come here to say to myself, what is it that Luke Worsham does to kids that is so different and so magical? And I don't know that exactly, but Robert Bly wrote a book this summer called Iron John. It's a bestseller, and it's about becoming a man and how to become a man. And he tells a little story in there that's a Grimm's fairy tale, and it relates to Luke. There was a guy who had a castle, and he lived next to a forest, and it was a dark, chaotic, lonely place. They paid no attention to it, did not like it, and just lived next to it, but didn't have any connection to it at all. And one day the king decided he wanted some venison, so he sent his best hunter and the dog over there in that forest, which he decided that's where the venison was, and they never came back. Well, this bothered him because he was the king, and so he sent 10 of his hunters and their dogs in, figuring the other guy had gotten lost, and they never came back. So then he got upset, and he sent 100 of these people and soldiers and guns, and they never came back. So then he had this decree, and he said, we are not going in there anymore. This is not a good idea. And so they just lived next to the forest, this wild place, and they never had any connection with it. Till this young man came, and he met the king, and he said, is there anything dangerous to do here? Oh, the king says, yes, there is actually, and it's over here, but we don't mess with this. Oh, he said, that'll be good. I'll go tomorrow. So he gets his dog, and this young man goes in the forest, and he's walking. He sees this beautiful pool, and as he walks by the pool, this hairy hand comes out and pulls the dog in. He says, this is the place. This looks good. Dangerous. Looks very dangerous. And so he went and got a whole group of men, and they came, and they took buckets. They bailed all the water out, and they found in the bottom of the pool this wild man. He was iron-colored, and they put him in a cage in the middle of the kingdom. And so the king didn't have a wild person loose, but he had one in the cage. And they gave the key to the king, and the king had a son. And the son had this beautiful golden ball, and he loved it more than anything. It was kind of everything in life to him. He played with it every day, and one day he was playing with it in the middle of the castle, and it rolled into the wild man's cage. And he said, can I have it back? I'm the son of the king. And the wild man said, oh, no, I got it now. If you want to get this back, you got to let me loose. Well, this was very upsetting to the boy, and he left. And he just wasn't going to let the wild man loose. And then one day he came back and he said, I might let you loose, but I don't even know where the key is. Well, he said, the key is under your mother's pillow, which we could spend about a month working on. So he went and got the key, and he opened up the cage, and he hurt himself as he opened it, but he got the ball back. And then the wild man said, I'm gone. He said, no, if you go, my father's going to know. He's going to beat me to death. He said, well, that's pretty accurate, I think. And he said, you can come with me. So they're walking out, and the wild man turns to him as they go into the forest and said, by the way, you're not ever going to see your parents again. Oh, he said, I'm not ever going to see? No, he said, but it's okay, because where you're going is wonderful, and what you're going to have is even better. Now, all of us have a golden ball when we're born, this wonderful human being that we are, and we lose it somewhere along the way, our manhood or something. And our world tells us that we get our manhood through community or education or something, and Robert Bly says that the fairy tale says we get it by getting in touch with the wild man. And that's what Luke Worsham does for us. that reckless, abandoned part. You know, Luke was the guy who thought up 5-on-1. Remember that? 5-on-1, you can't, 5 of you can't even get to 1, right? But you can actually get to 1. And it's that abandoned, reckless part that he teaches us all. And how many times has Luke Worsham been in your ear saying, son, it's going to be all right, and you're looking at somebody that's going to kill you? And it is all right. That's what he teaches us as a kid, I think. And finally, I've been thinking, what has Luke taught me as an educator? And Luke, I'll tell you what you have taught me that I still have in my dream. And that is that there's a guy named Lawrence Vanderpost who says that there are two kinds of people. They're the hunters, who are very loose. They carry almost nothing but a bow and paints to tell their story and water, and they move quickly, and they're risk takers. And then they're gatherers, and the other guys, they build barns, and they just want to fill it up and have more and more stuff. And he says those are the two kinds of people in the world, and that we have killed the hunter in our world, and that we are being ruled in all over the world by gatherers, that there are no hunters anymore. There are no risk takers. There are no tough people. And Luke has said to me over and over again as a person dealing with kids, Herb, you got to get them tough. You got to make them tough. And that's what we've got to do in education, and we're not doing it. And with Luke leaving, it's not just a man leaving Baylor, it's the passing of an era. And we cannot allow the legacy that you've given us, Luke, to be gone. We need to believe in that toughness that you taught us. My young son Daniel, who just came back from the war in the Navy, is not here tonight, but he said, Dad, what are you going to say about Luke? And I said, well, I'm going to say that Luke taught us how to find the hero in ourselves and bring it up and deal with it. And he said, you know how he did that? You know why he could do that? And I said, no, I don't. He said, because he was always our hero. And Luke, you still are.
In education, I'm called the facilitator. I only have really one question for all of you tonight, and I want you to answer honestly. How many of you, other than myself and Kitty Sorrow, got a haircut for tonight's festivities? Anybody cut down on their cigarettes? For this evening's major celebration, only a few of us will be privileged to speak. A handful of alums who represent, obviously, hundreds of students and friends. And therefore, before the festivities begin, we must recognize several of these silent ones. To Dawn Bullard, Joe Jumper, and her decorating committee, we hope you've seen all of these pictures around the hall. To the entire Alumni Development Office, especially the Herculean work done by our own driving force, because Luke needs to know, from Matt Lewis. And we thank all of you for making this special evening possible. Coach, you have always believed that to everything there is a season. And tonight we dedicate this bit of a season to you. But we remember that, as you often taught us, tomorrow the sun indeed will also rise again. In that view, folks, let us remember that tonight is a celebration both of the past and of a new beginning, and it is not a funeral dirge. Tomorrow, next week, next year, I promise you will find Coach still in the wrestling room, working with the heavyweights, teaching the shot putters and the discus throwers, substituting in the biology classroom, traveling with the alumni office, fishing, working at the Perry Center, gardening, and yes, even vacuuming. My job tonight is to keep this celebration moving. And to our more long-winded representatives, I would like at this moment to bring forth an illustrious artifact from the past to remind the dull that brevity indeed is the soul of wit. Don't tell me you don't recognize it. And it's here. At this time, Coach, I would like to recognize one of your past linemen and biology students. You will be most pleased to know that he has risen from the category of jackass and pissant those are all new words to us, to president and chairman of his own real estate company, representing the decade of the 70s, Mr. Gaston Rowell.
Thank you very much, Shaq. I greatly appreciate that introduction. Actually, I'd forgotten about being a pissant. I thought I was just a knuckle-headed briar eater. But I guess we can all be a little bit of that. I'm honored to be here and to be standing at this podium, especially with such an illustrious group of individuals. And when we started putting this scenario together last year to honor Major Worsham, we knew it would be a great occasion, but we had no idea that it would be this monumental. And we've got over 500 people who've turned out tonight to pay tribute to this gentleman. And I was one of the people that didn't have time to get a haircut before I came today, but it was the first time in my life I've ever ventured to drink a beer at a function where Major Worsham was around. And needless to say, I was wary. And sure enough, I kept peering over my shoulder, and I hadn't seen him since I'd been here since about 20 minutes after 6 o'clock. And all of a sudden, this great arm comes from behind and grabs me around the neck and yanks me backwards, and sure enough, there goes my beer. Straight on the floor. But anyway, I looked at him, and the first thing I always notice when I haven't seen the Mage in a long time are his eyes. And you get that look straight in there and you know it's no nonsense, it's time to get down to business. And you see that twinkle, and the eyes are truly the key to the soul. And you notice it when you look at this man, or it even is an eerie feeling when I look at this picture right here and see the same thing. But I said, Mage, I said, this is just phenomenal. I said, this is wonderful. He says, no, Gaston. He says, this is great. And I thought for a second, I said, well, it's a great day for a great man. And when I look at you tonight and I see everyone here, I realize that the Baylor family is united, and we are united for a special purpose. We're not the class of 1951 or the 10-year reunion of the class of 1991 or 81, but we're all here for the same purpose, and that purpose is to honor this remarkable man. And when you look at the crowd, I look out and I see W.W. Watson, 91 years old, came in here to honor his colleague, his protege. And then I look around at the other end of the spectrum and I see the grandchildren of the Weinberg family. And I say, goodness, I said, how many men and women now has this gentleman touched in his life? And there's no way to possibly count the way he's affected our personalities. And not only those that are not with us, but those that will follow after us too. But he taught us how to live. He taught us all the lessons of life. He taught us how to get knocked down And quite a bit of the time he did the knocking down himself. But believe me, I needed every bit of it, and so did the rest of you out there. But when you got knocked down, he taught you how to get back up and come up with a fire in your eyes to know that you can do a better job and that you're going to learn from that experience. And even if you're in the throes of defeat, you should learn from that defeat, accept it graciously, and then move on and be a gentleman. I'm not going to take a whole lot of other time because everyone could stand up here and tell you how important this gentleman is. But as a tribute to the Mage, we've got a couple of things that we would like to present him tonight, who all of you have contributed something to be here, and also for these commemoratives that we have for him. But the first item tonight is on my right-hand side, and contrary to popular belief, these are not Ku Klux Klansmen from Franklin County who come over here to scare off our football team. But this first item is a plaque that will be placed outside the wrestling room in honor of Mage with his figure on it, and we'd like to give it to you this time over here.
Now, Coach, I would like to recognize an ex-wrestler and military protege who spent 4 years with you in the dormitory. Winner of the Distinguished Alumnus Award, past president of the Alumni Association, and currently a Baylor trustee, representing the decade of the 50s, your fellow traveler on nationwide alumni trips, Everett Roberts.
Well, I learned a long time ago that you don't ever want to follow Herb Barks as a speaker. You know, it's downhill when you try and do that. Shaq is in that same company. And people get up here and they say, talk about the Mage and all that sort of thing. It was not, and I graduated in 1952. It wasn't until 1975 till I finally got enough courage to turn around and say, Luke, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but we'd made a number of road trips and had gotten to know each other fairly well, and so I got to where I was comfortable enough to say Luke, and he didn't hit me or anything like that. And but we've had a lot of fun. I don't have a great speech. One of the things that I did a number of years ago, I wrote Luke a letter and told him what I felt. And because most of the time folks don't do that when the timing's right. And Luke, tonight we've got a book of letters for you. Anybody that hadn't written him, you're welcome to do so. And Luke will answer all these, of course. This is just a small volume. It says Baylor School Alumni Book of Letters to Luke Worsham, November 1st, 1991. And I talked to Matt about this, and I said, Matt, you know, what'd I say? He says, say what you think. And I said, okay. Luke, I love you.
Everett means what he says. They've already begun a second book. If you haven't written, write. Our first featured speaker of the evening, quite literally, is a giant of a man with a giant-like resume. Just a few highlights. In the late 60s, John Hanna was an all-Mid-South lineman, a Mid-South and National Prep heavyweight wrestling champion, and Mid-South champ in the shot put and discus. His records in those two events still hold at Baylor 23 years later. Playing at Alabama for Bear Bryant, who called him, quote, the finest offensive lineman I have been around in 30 years, John was named All-SEC 3 times and All-American twice. In his senior year, he won the Jacobs Blocking Award and Newt Rockne Trophy as Collegiate Lineman of the Year. He was named All-American in wrestling and set school records at Alabama in the shot and discus. In 13 years with the New England Patriots, he was named All-Pro 10 times and played in 9 Pro Bowl games. He was the NFL Players Association Offensive Lineman of the Year for 4 straight years. He was named in 1981 by Sports Illustrated as the greatest offensive lineman of all time. This past year, he was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame, the first offensive lineman to be selected unanimously in his first year of eligibility. John retired from football in 1986. Currently, he is president and chairman of the board of the Hanna Group, a pension consulting firm in the Boston area, where he lives with his wife, Paige, and 2 children, Seth and Mary Beth. Ladies and gentlemen, John Hanna.
Everything that Shaq just said I owe to 2 people, or a couple people, but one of them sitting out there is my father, and the other one's sitting right here to my left, Major Worsham. I want to tell some story. I didn't write a formal speech either. I hopped on a plane, pulled out a pen, started writing. I said, shoot, I'm not going to do this. And I wadded up and threw it down. I said, I always want to talk it and just do what I thought. And I thought I'd go through, since I spent more time than any of you did with it, because I spent more on disorder than any of you guys did. Now, and that's the truth. I went to town 3 times my junior year. I don't know how many times y'all went. But disorder means you're punished. You couldn't go into town for a week at a time, in case you didn't know. So I only went in 3 times for the year. But Major Worsham, first time I met him, I want to thank him for a lot of things. First of all, he saved my life one time in the wrestling room. Major Worsham was on me all the time to climb that stinking rope. And I wasn't a real good rope climber, being as fat as I was, and am, continue to be, whatever. And so Major Worsham talked to Alex Roberts about getting me to climb that rope. He was the captain of the team that year. And so the way Alex did, I started climbing it, and by the time I got about halfway up, Alex stood down there, and he had been promoted to an officer that year, and he stood down below me with a sword. I couldn't go much higher up, but I sure wasn't going to go back down. Thank God Major Worsham came in and pulled him off, because I thought I was going to have a sword sticking out my mouth. I also remember coming in at Christmas time. We'd always have wrestling during Christmas time. I didn't want to be late for that 7 o'clock, and I was leaving an hour, so I ran up, and about 7 o'clock in the morning, Coach came over and knocked on the window and woke me up. I said, "Knucklehead, why didn't you come down to the house and spend?" Shoot, I'd gotten in late that night, and I wasn't about to wake him up. 5-on-1 drills, I'll tell you, there are 5-on-1 drills, and they work. Because had it not been for 5-on-1 drills, I would still try to be a defensive lineman today. Thank God he did put me in those, so I'd learned to play offense where you were one of the 5 instead of the 1. The other thing I remember about football was those outings that we had at you know, they were just social gatherings, you got to understand, up at Scott Mayfield's house. The time his dad built a football field out in the middle of his pastures. You know, it was just social, right, Scott? just because the yard marks soft and things like that. And we'd go to the dairy and drink ice cream and milk every night, and it wasn't supervised either. It's just a couple times Major Worsham came up and looked at us, make sure we were okay and just having a good time on our vacation. But that year, because of those things, the kind of dedication we had, we didn't win all the Mid-South teams when we played the TMIs and the guys that had some unbelievable teams. They all shaved by the time they were 6 if they were only 8 teams. But I remember we played Central, and I believe they were ranked 12th when we played them. Major Worsham, we beat them 30-something to 6 or 10 or something like that. And then we turned around a couple weeks later and beat Oak Ridge up in Oak Ridge, and something Baylor never done. And had a good team. And it was because of the kind of discipline that we had. But the other things I remember about Major Worsham was, and what somebody else yelled about it, was after the game I had a real tendency to sweat a lot, you know, and because of that I'd cramp. And I remember one night, man, I fell from my chair and both legs were just, I mean, it was awful. And he worked on me for 2 hours getting those cramps out. And I remember that. And I also remember the time we were down in Rome, Georgia, playing Darlington, and they had that lime all over the field. And it rained, and if you don't know what that'll do to you, it just burns your skin. I mean, it just eats it off. And he went out and bought a bunch of vinegar and had us all washed down with vinegar, and he really took care of us. The other thing I remember is in track, and I remember this, and I need to thank Miss Worsham too, is that, you know, I tended to stay down there a little longer than most, and Major Worsham always saved my dinner for me because, you know, I'd be down there working, and he'd always have me sit at his table at the other times. We'd go with it. And I remember the biggest thing I remember is going to the Golden West track tournament out in California, and they had these guys out here. I mean, good golly, this one kid, you think I threw it a long way. You should have seen this one. He warm up, he threw it, what, 72 feet, Major? It was unbelievable. I said, oh, God, I'll never do this. And he pulled me off the side. He said, John, just do the best you can. Don't worry about it. Well, the boy went out there and just choked. Couldn't even throw it. The boy that was just, he should have walked away with it and wound up taking the medal in it because Major Worsham said, just do the best you can. Remember the erasers hitting me in the head in biology? I remember the genetics class that you taught at the expense of some of our fellow students' parents. He's not here tonight, no. No, Bessie's not here tonight. And I remember going to Tellico Plains and eating gravy and biscuits and eating so much we had a great time. And the biggest thing I want to say, and the biggest thing I remember, is that when I was going through that junior year, when everybody else at Baylor I felt was deserting me and leaving me alone, Major Worsham stood by me. And he's the only one that did. And I will say this, and I don't care if it offends anybody or anything else, but when Major Worsham leaves Baylor School, to me, there is no more Baylor School, because he's the only good thing that I really cherish about it. And I love him with all my heart, and I always will. And Dottie, Myra, thank you for letting me be a part of my life, because he's a great man. I love him.
At this time, I would like to recognize the captain of one of your past teams whose overtime win in the state finals against the defending state champion clinched your 4th team title. Representing the 80s, your fishing friend, Bobby Bullard.
I'm here tonight to make a presentation to a man, as you've heard, that's meant many things to many people. I'm here to represent not only myself, but a decade of men and women from the 80s who wish to express their appreciation and gratitude to Major Luke Worsham. Major Worsham, I want you to know how much you've meant to me and how much direction your lessons about life have given me. Because of your caring and your dedication to teaching young men and women the difference between right and wrong, I've been able to make decisions which have given me strength and peace of mind. As you've shown all of us, through example, the easy choices are not always the right choices. But if we believe in who we are, we can pull from within ourselves and persevere. It's not often that a man has the opportunity to have two mentors in life. I am the exception. Both you and my grandfather have given me the necessary tools to be successful in life. It's been said that the mark of a truly successful man is not how many material things he can acquire over his lifetime, but instead how many people he can call his friends. In this, you're the most successful man that I know. Thank you for all the things that you've given me and us. And my only hope is that someday I'll be able to influence at least one person in the manner that you've influenced hundreds. We believe that generations of future Baylor students need to know the man we are here to honor. Therefore, I'd now like to unveil this portrait on behalf of all the people that I represent. This portrait, which the Jim Jolly family has so graciously donated, will hang in Memorial Gymnasium near the star which honors the Baylor veterans of World War II. And how many lessons you've brought from the battlefield into the classrooms to us. As our star, Coach Worsham, this portrait will be placed in the company of two other Baylor legends, Coaches Jim Wright and Humpy Haywood. And also at this time, Coach, I'd like to give you and Mrs. Worsham a copy of the portrait, which you can hang in your new home in Baylor Road. Thanks a lot.
Now for the toughest part. We forgot to acknowledge somebody. We all know the old cliche that behind every great man stands a great woman. But cliches can be true. Except in this case, we picture her beside rather than behind her man. Mrs. Worsham doesn't take to back seats kindly, nor does she suffer fools gladly. Betty Flo, you raised two wonderful daughters who are here with us, Dottie and Myra. And tonight we honor you as a selfless mother to hundreds. We respect you as our librarian and as our #1 disciplinarian. And from the heart, we thank you for your patience, your understanding, and your deep felt loyalty. Without you, we know there is no Luke Worsham. Please accept this gift from the friends and alums of Baylor as we all applaud and force to stand the Worsham women. Our second featured speaker of the evening is, quite obviously, not a giant in any literal sense. But he stands as a giant in his quest for spiritual truth. We knew him as Randy Weinberg in 1970 when he gave his valedictory address. He was winner of the O.B. Andrews Award as Outstanding Senior. His classmates voted him most talented and done most for Baylor. He was a 5-time Mid-South Wrestling champion. At the national preps, he placed third twice. He was a runner-up, and he was a champion. In his senior season, as captain of the team, he led Baylor to its only national championship. Randy was also Luke's Mid-South pole vault champion. Later at Princeton, he majored in history and the philosophy of science and was named to Phi Beta Kappa. In 1974, Randy traveled to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, only the second in the history of the Baylor School. His studies led him to Thailand, where in 1977 he was ordained as a Buddhist monk. Today, Kittisaro is a mendicant monk associated with his monastery in Sussex, England. It is an honor to welcome home the Venerable Kittisaro.
I'm the one who's, I feel very privileged and very honored to be here. I wouldn't miss this occasion for anything. In the Buddhist calendar, this is a special festival time of the year, and we have things happening in our monasteries in England. I didn't have to think for a second. I knew where I wanted to be, and I'm very, very grateful to be here. As I listened to all these things that have been said tonight, everything resonated with me, and I know I'm not going to be able to express how much Major Worsham has meant to me, but I'll try. It's very rare when you meet someone in your life who has a profound transforming effect on you. At first you're not sure really how it's going to be. My first memory was being transformed from earthbound to airbound when a right foot lifted me off the gym floor. But already some lessons were starting to penetrate. And all these things that have been said are true. I don't really remember that many wrestling moves that I was taught anymore. I'm pretty tied up in my robes now. And I don't really remember much of the details of the science classes or biology classes. But what is transferred and what mysteriously is transferred when you meet a special person are qualities of the heart. And Major Worsham seemed to empower me to have enough courage to dream about what you can accomplish. He made us feel like you can do it. Don't be intimidated by all your fears. You can go for it. You can try hard, really work hard, and just see what happens. And I remember when I first saw these, I saw Charlie Moore tonight. It's wonderful to see him, because he was the first picture I saw on the wall in the gym of a national champion. I thought, God, maybe I could be a national champion. And yet, it's people like Major Worsham that give you the road to that. Major Worsham taught us that if you want something, you got to be willing to work for it. And you got to be willing to sacrifice something for it. And you have to be willing not to talk yourself out of it, but to stay with it. And those sort of things, Major Worsham, in his own magical way, was able to impart to me. He wanted to win, and he loved to win. We all know Major Worsham didn't have a voice left after any of the matches or football games. But he also, what he really he wasn't just after us winning. What he was really after is people growing up and people becoming really good human beings and people being willing to try hard. And I'm grateful for that. But there's another side of Major Worsham. There's a soft side and a really incredibly generous side that I want to mention. And because sometimes if someone's just obsessed about winning, that just divides people. If we're really obsessed about winning, that's all we're really interested in. And yet that's not what was motivating Major Worsham. And I'll show you. I remember once we went up to Castle Heights and we wrestled them. And then as was his habit, after we wrestled a team, he'd have us show them everything that we did. He'd have us give them a clinic. And I just beat this boy 2-0 in a really close match, Hugh Green. And I knew I was going to have to wrestle him again in the Mid-South tournament. And Major Worsham said, all right, get out there and show him what you did. I said, you're crazy. I beat him 2-0. I got a takedown. You want me showing my barrel roll? And he told me, he said, if they get better, then you got to get better. And he had this incredible big heart that wanted everybody to get better. He wanted everyone to and that's why at Christmas time, all the teams were invited and he'd give a clinic for everybody. There were no secrets. And that's not someone who's obsessed with winning. That's someone who loves giving. And I think the most important quality that I see is this incredible joy in giving of one's life. He was out at Christmas every time. I never ever heard Major Worsham say, I've done all this for you, now you better do this for me. Never. He just loved to give himself completely to the school and his whole family. And it's this quality of being willing to offer ourselves to each other that's what love is about, and that's what can really touch your heart. And that's why I'm here tonight, because he has touched all of us. And there's an incredible gathering here of weird-looking, bald-headed monks to old people, young people, doctors, lawyers, all kinds of beings. And yet something's drawing us together, and it's this gratitude for having known a compassionate, a giving, a kind person, and someone who delights in living. Major Worsham's joy is something I'll never forget. It's his joy. It's not a heavy, stern, kind of just glum, dour kind of thing, though he could, when he's kicking you, you're not laughing. But there is a real joy, a delight in striving. Striving doesn't have to be heavy. Striving can be a joy in just applying ourselves and really seeing what happens. And if you lose, if you really gave yourself to something and you would lose, Major Worsham would respect you. And that's really a wonderful, wonderful quality. And so, and also Major Worsham has an incredibly open-minded. You might not think that. You think, oh, he's of the old school. But when I came back looking like this, I didn't know what I was going to meet when I met Major Worsham. And he didn't blink an eye. He looked at me and he said, you still using your mind? I said, yeah, we're allowed to read. And he said, and he said, what about your health? You taking care of your health? He said, yeah, I try to do some exercise. And he says, all right. And that was it. And he would walk around that campus arm in arm with me looking like this. And Buddhist monks, as I said earlier the other day, are thin on the ground in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he'd walk arm in arm. And when I'd come into a classroom, he says, you know who you're talking to? And he'd give me the most heartwarming welcome. And that's someone who is loyal. I mean, really loyal. And it's a really beautiful quality. And I'm so grateful to be here. And Major Worsham, what I want to offer to you is when I see the results and the fruits of a life of giving, someone who loves to offer and share, then what I want to offer is, to the best of my ability, I want to make my life like your life, a life of trying to give and help and share what I know and be a true good friend to other living beings. And I'm very, 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 very grateful to know you, and I consider you a very special person. Thank you very much.
would like to recognize now the last person to represent all of you. Coach, he's your past captain, champion, and most valuable wrestler. Your assistant coach through 2 state championship seasons, a fellow lover of the outdoors and the biological sciences, Dr. Chris Moore.
I'm humbled to be up here following this group of people who've meant so much not only to Baylor but more specifically to this man. I'm also humbled to be representative of all y'all because I know there's some frustration out there when you hear these stories. We've all had such great anecdotes with Major Worsham that we all want to tell those stories. In fact, I was one of the 3 or 4 people assigned to hold down this tree trunk, which turned out to be John Hanna's leg, while Major Worsham massaged that muscle spasm out of it. And there are many stories that we all could tell. In one of those championship years that Shaq referred to, we were taking the team to Nashville. As it was Major Worsham's habit, we not only took all those who qualified to wrestle in the state tournament, but as he repeatedly told us all, told the wrestlers all, it was a team effort all the time. And so not only would those who qualified go, but the whole team would go, along with managers, assistant coaches. So it was quite a contingency that we would take. And we, therefore, would be staying in Nashville 3 nights, eating plenty of meals. It was going to cost the school a lot of money. And on our first afternoon there, we stopped at lunch before we'd even gone to the hotel. And in getting ready to pay for the meal, Major Worsham reached inside of his coat pocket, pulled out a big envelope and opened it up, and there's just wads of cash there. And I looked at Shaq and pulled him over the side and said, Shaq, this kind of makes me nervous. I mean, we're walking around this whole weekend, and he didn't bring credit cards or anything. He's just going to carry this cash right here the whole weekend. Shaq looked at me and said, is there a safer place? My colleagues who have come before you tonight and made the other presentations are just that, colleagues, not only in our common status as alums of Baylor, but more specifically in our devotion to this man we are honoring. All of us, along with Shaq and Matt, were given the task of bringing this evening together, but also in trying to establish some fitting tributes to a man who had literally given almost all of his adult life to one institution. So we asked those questions: what are the things that mean so much to him that we can honor him with? Is it the faculty that he has so devotedly been a part of for so many years, whose members he has seen come and go, and an untold number who have been his colleague as faculty? Is it the wrestling mat or wrestling arena where he has jerked a knot in plenty of person's head, where he has given untold number of hours, pounds of sweat? Is it the classroom or the lab where he's taught us so much more than biology? Is it the sidelines of the football field, the track, where he's done the things that John referred to in terms of only doing your best? All of these things we knew were important to him. But it didn't take this group very long to focus on the students themselves, the real targets, and therefore the real beneficiaries of this tremendous spirit that Luke embodies. It's my great pleasure tonight to make this final presentation. It's a presentation we feel goes out to that group, students students of the future, those most of whom who do not yet even know Major Worsham. And it's my pleasure to announce the Luke Worsham Scholarship, which will be established at this point at Baylor. The guidelines of who is to receive those scholarships have not yet been established, but they will be by a committee of school officials, which most importantly will have Luke among that committee to help establish those guidelines. I think it's important to know that at this point there are no characteristics, qualities, or whatever that we have established at this point, because we think to this point this has been an unknown thing to Luke, and we want him to establish those guidelines. Other than the fact that it will go to someone who has demonstrated financial need based on the Princeton School Scholarship Form, there are no other guidelines. But I think it's an important and fitting testimony for this group and for Luke to know that as of right now, well over 300 alumni have contributed in gifts ranging from $5 on up to a fund that already has over $144,000 in addition to a $25,000 deferred fund. So in closing, the one thing I can conjecture that will mean a lot to Luke in terms of establishing these guidelines is that these people, all now unknown to us, will be people who will be participants in life in whatever form, whether it's as an NFL All-Pro lineman or whether it's as a spiritual giant or anything in between. I think they will be participants. And it brings to mind what Teddy Roosevelt said when he was surely talking about the Luke Worshams of the world, when he says, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out where the strong man stumbled or where the doer of great deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, and who, while daring greatly, spends himself in a worthy cause so that his place may not be among those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So to Luke, to those of us who've known both and learned to deal with both because of you, I present you this scholarship.
Ladies and gentlemen, Major Coach Mr. Luther Luke Worsham.
My daughters asked me, said, you better figure out something to say. I think it's been said already. I would like to thank each and every one of you. You're my children, and I love you. I'd like to thank the people that have taken part in this program. You've done an excellent job. You've taken something very small and made something very large out of it. And I appreciate it. The greatest thing that I appreciate more than anything else, as I look around this room, I see a tremendous number of people that have grown up to become ladies and gentlemen, and they have wonderful children. I mentioned this morning at the pep rally that Baylor has 4 or 5 people on their football team who are third-generation football players for Baylor. They won't be college football players, but they've learned a lesson that only Baylor can teach. The most important thing is not being a football player. It's not being a state champion in wrestling. It's learning to push yourself to your limits. I have loved being at Baylor. It's a great place. And I think all of us have been blessed in the fact that we were able to be there. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with you. I am sure that there are times that you would like to kill me. Jack Stanford said once, says, Worsham, you always volunteer us for everything that there is to do. Every time there's a job to be done, you up there raising your hand for me and you to go do something. That's one reason I left you. I will say one thing. You don't become a millionaire being a school teacher, but you're the wealthiest person in the world. You have more friends. And I wouldn't give anything in the world for my experience at Baylor. And I hope that the young teachers that come along behind me, I hope they can just receive a third or a fourth of the enjoyment that I've had since I've been at Baylor. Thank you very much for being here tonight. And if I don't get a chance to see you tonight, come by my house. I'll be there tomorrow. And I'll be volunteering myself for anything that I can do to help young people. And it's a great experience. I thank you very much.
You can stay on your feet. You can stay up. This is going to take 28 seconds. Coach, at our wrestling banquets, you taught me but a few things. Review the season. Hand out the hardware. Name your leaders. Tell the mamas what their sons learned or were supposed to have learned. And then tell them to go home and do their homework, because tomorrow is another day. I hope we have done all that. I hope we have said all that. Thank you, Coach. We love you. And thank you, friends. Company dismissed.